Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and because it's the Buff and because it's every week, we're going to have a great show this week because, well, for a number of reasons, but the main one is that we have the world's greatest listeners. You have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle.com. Remember, share the love, share the buff, yada, yada, yada. Okay, you know these things, right? But I say them because they're important. They're important to me because they're important to you. I mean, really, deep down, you should do these things. You have duties and you should fulfill them. All right, hit the 5-star review button, hit subscribe or like or whatever else that is. Tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. And somewhere buried in the show notes is a little link where you can buy me a coffee or one of these gigantic, okay, I'll tell you this much. Your 79 cents at the Circle K when I'll get me any size soft drink. So you could do that for me as well. Anyway, we appreciate you and we are glad that you are here. And you will be glad that you are here because today is a great, great show. We have a guest today, a big brain smarthead, a former university CFO and administrator, an amateur equestrian, a musician, an avid hiker and outdoors woman, an all-around wonderfully friendly person, my sister, Maura Donahue. Maura, how are you this fine spring morning?
Oh, good morning, Rafe. I am really great. I'm thrilled to be on the podcast and just excited to be here and excited that we finally have some sunny weather in Ohio instead of the torrential rain that we've been having for the last couple. But
yeah, Ohio is one of those places that is not known for its, balmy is not a word that comes to mind with Ohio, but certainly in the springtime.
Yeah, correct. But it's lovely today. So
well, that's great. So you are okay. So we are in springtime, and I want to talk about things because I live, like I said, I live just north of Indianapolis, and when you go to the road that gets to my house, right across the street from this subdivision that we have, there is a horse farm, and they have retired horses there. So I'm assuming the horses do the kinds of things during the day that I do, which is, they record their little horse podcasts and they do those sorts of things. But there are horses there and they seem to frolic in the pasture and they chat with each other in their little horse language. They go down to the creek. Sometimes they run across the creek to the pasture on the other side. And it is a wonderfully beautiful place. And I found out not long ago, that unbeknownst to me, I have to set this up. You and I were in college together when I was a senior and you were a freshman.
correct.
And then since that time, our worlds have parted quite a bit, quite dramatically, actually, for siblings. And we meet on occasion at times. All right.
Yes. Big events or small events.
Big events and sometimes small events, sometimes worthless events, but fun events. But there was a thing that you've been doing that I had no idea you had been doing. And it comes as a shock to me. And it's something I would like to know more about. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is your experience as an amateur equestrian. I didn't know you ride the little horses and you wear the funny hat, right? The helmet. And so how long have you been doing this and how does it work?
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks, Rafe. You never know what's going to come out of your mouth when we start talking.
Yes.
So amateur would be the word that should be in capital letters. Say. And equestrian even makes it sound more grand than it has been. So the story really starts a gajillion years ago when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Dayton. And back then, you may remember this, we had to take, I think it was like 2 credits of physical education in order to graduate from the university. Do you remember that?
Now that you say, I think I took racquetball and I might have taken basketball.
Yeah.
It wasn't weightlifting. I know that for sure. But
Well,
and carrying around a math calculator was not considered physical education. But yes,
even as large as the calculators were then, they weren't
yes,
that
and
heavy.
and this one that I still have on my desk. So
Oh, that's a good one. Anyway, so the journey started way back when in undergrad. I took I think it was a 2 credit hour horse. I think they called it horsemanship, and they, campus didn't have riding stables. Campus didn't have an arena or anything like that. So they would ship us down to somewhere south of town where the farms started to happen. And so I took a semester worth of how to ride a horse, and it was Western style. But they taught us the things like, how to groom the horse and pick the feet and put the saddle blanket and the saddle pad and the saddle on and all of that. And all of that. So that was when I was maybe 20 years old, and it was fun, but it only went so far because it was only one semester. Then, life happened and graduate school and children and families. And then I think over the course of the next, whatever it is, from then until 5 years ago.
you would call that over the next lifetime.
Over the next lifetime. Yeah. I rode maybe twice, right? Like on family vacations, where you're like, oh, let's go horseback riding on family vacation. So you go and you get saddled up and they read you this thing about, how you have to behave on horse and all of that. And then you get on the horses that are about 25 years old and they go super slow and you're all in this line. And I was like, this is not what I'm looking for. Like, this is not fun. It was just kind of boring. Anyway, then fast forward to, I guess, about 5 years ago, I decided that summer that I needed to do something new. And that something was to start riding horses again and taking lessons. And so up here I live near, just north of the Columbus area. There's the county that I'm in is a big horse county. There's harness racing and all kinds of things up here in this county. And so I signed up for lessons and I took weekly lessons for about a year until it just got too cold because you ride whether it's 18 degrees or not. And I just didn't want to do that. So I took lessons for a while. It was Western, started to learn all kinds of great things about how to really control the horse and do things like, those spins in the middle where you just kind of go round and round and round and round. And that was fun.
Well, we're talking horses now, not ice skating, right?
Yes, that is on a horse.
You don't learn to do a triple axel on a horse, right? That's
well, it kind of looks like that, but
okay.
But you're not. But you don't launch up in the air, right? You're just going around in a tight.
Hopefully, you don't launch in the air.
Well, no, you want to stay in your saddle.
Okay. Okay. So now I've been really good.
Well, you've been
at letting you tell your story. Okay, but I have questions. Okay, this is the whole point here.
Right.
All right. So now you mentioned I have a number of things I've written down as you were going. Okay. I'm going to actually the second thing I noticed is a smaller thing than the first thing I noticed. Okay, you talk about they teach you how to groom the horse and pick the feet.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay.
What is picking the feet?
Pick like so the feet. I'm sure all your listeners can see what I'm doing with my hands.
Our listeners have fantastic imaginations. They can pick anything.
So, so you've seen a horseshoe, like the shape of the horseshoe that kind of goes along the outside of, the bottom around the edge of the foot. But the insides of their feet are kind of, what would I say? Like arced. They're not solid on the bottom.
Right.
There's this I'll say like holes almost. They're not holes, but they're like divots, right? And that's called the frog. Well, the who? The other part is called the frog. It's this part of the foot. I don't know why it's
horses have frogs. Okay, well, but that's a word. Okay, so that word frog, like when you're looking at a train track. Where it splits and the rails go across each other and the flange has to go in between. That's called a frog as well.
Yeah. So frog is like the uppy part. Like, there's the divot. Yeah. The divots are like on the sides where the frog isn't. The frog is like the middle.
I think the frog is the place where it's not. Okay, where the other thing is not. But okay,
I'm
we'll
sure
have to
that
look
you
up
have
frogs.
listeners. I'm sure you have listeners who know way more about this than I do. And so my apologies if I'm messing this up. But anyway, the picking is what's important. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And because, horses, when they're standing around or frolicking around in their pastures and doing those retired horse things,
Yes.
they can step on stones and stuff. And if it's muddy, then the mud gets in there and muds and stones and all of this. If that's not picked out before you ride them, that can injure the horse in the long run.
Right.
So we have to, you kind of,
You lift
you grab the animal and you help them raise their foot up, and then you hold their foot and you pick with this kind of
a
looks
horse like a
a
pick,
horse pick. It's like a screwdriver that has
a hook.
a hook on the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you get all the crud out of there.
Like a paint can opener.
Very much, very much.
Okay.
And on the other end of it is a stiff,
Bottle opener.
no, a stiff brush.
Okay. Yeah.
So that you can also kind of brush
Scrape it out.
the dirt, and a lot of times it's just manure too, and that's
Yeah. Well, that's I mean,
yeah,
stuff gets in there, right?
It's
Yeah.
horses, yeah.
Well, and they're animal. Okay. So but the hoof is that the right term? The hoof is that's their toenail, right? Or their fingernail, or some kind of combined gigantic toe. That's what that is, right?
It is, yeah. Like I'm sure a lot of people have watched the videos on YouTube or Insta of like the farriers, kind of cutting down and filing off the extra hoof when they go to reshoe the horse, right? They take the old shoe off, then they file them down, or sometimes if they're super long, they need like the little pincher,
Big clippers,
big clipper cutter things. Yeah, they're not little,
Yeah.
And they put them in a holding thing so that the horse is more comfortable while the farrier works.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you farrier? Farrier? Farrier?
I think so. I know
Okay.
I know it ends the way it ends. I don't know if it's FA or FE, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's okay.
I've never looked it up. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's okay. This is fascinating because I've seen the videos of them reshoeing the horse, but I've also seen the videos of, hey, we found this horse that had been neglected for 2 years, living in a stall without running around on a hard surface, and they have toenails that are like
awful,
and they can barely walk, right? So they need natural wear downedness.
They need regular grooming and attention to their feet.
Now, if they were, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that the thing that I don't know how that word is spelled, just as a sidebar here.
Yeah.
The thing that's has been so different for me, and you might appreciate this too. So having been, received a lot of formal education in my lifetime, as did you, we read a lot, right? And it's, the uptake is through the written word and articles and all of that. In the horse riding space, this is experiential learning. This is see one, do one,
teach one. Yeah.
And so that had been a bit of an adjustment for me. So it's like, well, okay, so pick the feet. How do you do that? Where's the manual? Well, there's no manual. You just do it like this. Like, okay, So it was just different for me.
Well, that's good though. That's one of those things that you do with any of those. I guess I'll call it a lot of the trade skills and a lot of the craftsmanship skills are done. That when last summer when we were, people were carving stones, and you can read about how to use a stone chisel on a piece of granite, and you can read about how to push a piece of plywood through a table saw, and you can read that. But until you do it. Do you remember that? Do you remember the movie with Brendan Fraser and Christopher Walken?
Was he the mummy guy? It was Brendan Fraser.
He was the mummy guy, right? But there's one where he is a boy that is born in a bomb shelter in Los Angeles because his parents, like he was born at the height of the Cold War because his father was really, really paranoid. And his father built a bomb shelter in the backyard, and a plane crashed one night, and he thought for sure it was the Soviets attacking. And so he locked the bomb shelter for 20 years. And he and his pregnant wife, who was played by this one lady, I want to say Sissy Spacek, but I know that's not right, but it's a lady. So Brendan Fraser, whose character is named Adam. His name is Adam, and he's So he's born in the bomb shelter, and so his whole life is just his entire upbringing is his mom, who's this sissy spigot lady who drinks all the time because she's in a bomb shelter with Christopher Walken. Okay,
I would too.
Yeah, so they're in the bomb shelter, and there's this situation where they're watching videotapes of baseball games. Oh. Okay, and his dad's trying to explain the concept of the force out. That if you can get the ball to the bag before the runner gets to the bag, then the guy's out. And the kid goes, well, why is he out? And his dad said, because he must run. And the kid's like, and he can't get his head around, you must run. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then what happens? Of course, he gets older. He grows up. He's 20 something. And they decide to open the bomb shelter. And he comes out and it's Los Angeles. Okay. And he meets this girl named Eve. Yes, he meets Eve. Okay. But he's watching like a rec league softball game, and he's sitting in the stands watching it go on because he's never seen any of this. And suddenly he goes, he must run. Okay. So that's that. Yeah. So that's an expression for something that is suddenly becomes, it's this epiphany of knowledge, right? And you pick that up when you're, this is how it must go when you pick the feet. Yes. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question because we want to talk about other things, okay? Yeah, okay? You mentioned twice that you took Western riding.
Yes.
As opposed to Eastern riding or this Orthodox riding?
As opposed to English.
Okay. How do the English ride? They capitalize everything or?
Much more fancy. Very, so in a lay person's view, it's the English, the saddle is very different, right? I mean, so if you think about Western riding, just think of any Kevin Costner movie with where he's out West. That's Western riding. Okay. So you've got these saddles that are really big, that like go up on the back. Like you can really see where you sit in that Western.
Right. All right.
The English saddle is much smaller and sleeker, and the stirrups are smaller. Everything about it is just kind of fancy. So if you ever look at when Queen Elizabeth rode a horse, that, the one who just passed away.
Yes.
Yeah, because she was an excellent rider, as was her sister, right? Or her daughter. Which one was it? Anyway, one of them was amazing. But yeah, so the English riding is just very different. You sit the horse differently. It's a lot more like inner thigh work. I mean, this riding is very physically demanding, actually, in both. But you have to do more when you're in English. English are the ones that when you wear the outfit, right? You wear those black boots that come all the way up to your knees, and you have little white pants, and then you have that black velvet jacket or, blazer, and then the black riding helmet. Now, I have that sort of helmet because I want to protect my dome. And actually at the stables where I was riding, every rider must wear a helmet, even if you're riding Western style.
Well, they make you do that when you're skiing now too, right? When you go skiing, you got to wear a helmet. It's just a thing.
Just as a sidebar, I went skiing again for the first time in 40 years this February. And I was so surprised. Everybody had helmets. Everybody had goggles. I was like, what? It was amazing.
Where are the bikini skiers is what I was wondering.
Yeah, where's everybody in jeans? Everyone's wearing these $300, snow pants. And anyway.
Okay, so that's Western riding, English riding. Okay, that is phenomenal. And so you did that when you first moved to the Columbus area. Are you still doing that or just?
So I'm doing something related but different. So I think I mentioned to you just now that I rode for about a year taking lessons at this one stable. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of had to focus more on my work, and it was too cold. And so then by the time that spring came again and I called my stable and I was like, hey, I want to get in for lessons again. They're like, I'm sorry, we're all full. We don't have any openings. I was like, oh, shoot, darn. So I had to kind of put that aside for a little bit. But I was still really intrigued, and I wanted to do something that wasn't work.
A llama.
Wasn't my job. No, but that'd be fun. That would be really, anyway, we could talk about ducks too.
Yes.
We're going to talk about ducks. So there is what is the name of this? Equestrian therapy program up here. There's a very well regarded program here in the county where I live that does equestrian therapy for first responders, for children with autism or autism related, spectrum kinds of conditions. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go volunteer there and see what they need. And so you had to go through a training process. And what I do there is, which I love, is just the barn. I call it barn support, right? So, every day they run lots of lessons, and someone has to get the horses ready for the kids to go on the horse. And so I help with supporting that function by, some days it's just cleaning stalls, doing, putting hay down, putting bedding down, filling water buckets. Or what I like more is to groom the horses. So go in, look at the schedule for the day, see what horses we're using, go in the barn, get the horses ready, put them in the cross ties, groom them up, get their blankets on and all of this stuff so that they'll be ready just in time for their lessons.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, they must love that, because everybody loves getting their head scratched, and you're brushing the whole horse. It's got to be just wonderful for them. Do they like to be ridden?
Mostly. Yeah, I'll say mostly. They all have very different temperaments. And this is a not-for-profit 501c3 kind of organization. And sometimes they receive donated horses. And we have to spend some time kind of checking them out, really, to see whether or not they're worthy of having one of these riders, right?
Whether you can trust them.
Whether you can trust the horse. Yeah. So the ones who do get through are very good. That being said, when the weather is nice, and like you said, you see your horses, they're frolicking around and being all happy. Well, these horses would rather be outside and not have to work. Right. So, because it is work for them. And so sometimes they get a little miffed that you're trying to take them out, but then they settle down and they're fine.
All right. Well, they act more like grown-ups at the end, right?
Yeah. They're great. Yeah.
Okay. Now you mentioned in discussing these therapy horses, I guess, is that you got into that because you were looking to do some other things just outside of your work, and that segue. Okay. And that brings us to your work that you do, and you spent a long time working in higher education.
Yes.
And now you work, I'm going to say, with higher education instead of necessarily in it. Probably might be the preposition. So what exactly are you doing? And tell us what you do. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, right. So just to, for your listeners, my work in higher education, just a little over 25 years. Like all of our siblings, I was the youngest and felt compelled to also have to get a PhD in something after I finished undergrad. So doctorate in finance, MBA, and started teaching finance actually at a university when I first came out with my graduate degree. Long story short, my most recent position was, as you said earlier in the introduction, Vice President for Finance and Administration at a small liberal arts college here in Ohio. And that was, it was a great ride. I'll just say it was 25 years that I really enjoyed. Some years enjoyed them more than others. But it got to a point in my life now that do we say we're middle age? What do we say we are?
See, well, you can ask yourself, if you are at middle age, where will you end up? And I have to say, I think I'm in the fourth quarter.
Oh,
You may not be, but I'm pretty sure.
Third quarter, I think. Yeah.
But I'm. You know what? I'm going to overtime. I'm.
That's one way to do it. Okay. Yes, we're all going to.
If you have a great defense, you can keep playing. You can double overtime. There are no limits to numbers of overtime. However many extra periods they can put there on the scoreboard, they'll just slide them over. Extra innings, lots of extra innings. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, anyway,
but good defense is what gets you there.
Yeah. So anyway, your listeners probably know when-ish we graduated, so we'll leave it at that. But
my listeners think I'm 14.
Well, I can tell your listeners that I have a lovely family, and all of my children are adult children. We'll say that. Okay. And as I was getting into these later innings of the game, I learned that one of my children was going to be having a baby soon, which would make me a grandmother. And I was so excited. And in fact, I was more excited than I realized I was going to be. Like, it's sort of not until you really start processing this that it hits you. Anyway, and I thought about the work that I was doing, which was important work, absolutely important work. However, it was grueling and it was exhausting and it was very stressful. And I was, what I would say, over-rotated on work. I was over-focused. And it was at that time that I realized I needed to make a change. The stress levels that I was experiencing were creating some negative health outcomes for me. And I knew I needed to stop that. I was not well, and I was not feeling well. So about a year and a half ago, I made the decision to leave my organization and really took a leap into launching my own business. And now, as you said, I would say I work alongside higher education in what I do. So I started a consulting business helping colleges and universities with financial issues, financial and operational challenges that they're facing. And if you are paying attention to the news, if your listeners are reading the news, especially the higher ed news, you'll know that there are plenty of challenges right now in the higher ed space as we make our way into what's called the demographic cliff, where there are just fewer and fewer 18-year-olds that are going to be coming on the scene in the coming years.
Yeah. So let me make sure I got, so about almost 20 years ago, there was a dramatic change in, I guess I'll just call it reproduction rate here in the U.S., right?
Yeah. It was with the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, there was a dramatic drop off, especially in the Northeast and the Midwest states.
Right. So that means there's fewer kids that are now coming of college age, and things are shifting, things are changing. And the idea of having, a zillion applicants to fill a very small number of spots, it's not quite the same. Some places are doing great, some places are doing poorly. I mean, there's always been spread, right? But there's there's a cliff coming, and the cliff, it's actually not a cliff, it might be a wall. It's a change.
Down. Yeah.
It's going down and staying down. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I started doing, and was doing that last year. And then took a bit of what I'm calling a self-imposed sabbatical from December through about March, April this year.
Did you argue with yourself about that? Yes, you can. No, you can't. Just like because
did I have to apply? The main question is, did I have to apply?
Did you fill out? Was there anybody else involved on the committee?
No, actually, that's one of the really interesting things about having your own business is I have to be the boss and tell myself what to do, and then I have to actually accept the work. Be like, oh, I don't know that I want to do that,
Right. And it's like, well, you don't have to. When I did a thing one time where it's long and complicated, but I set up a self IRA. What do you call it? A self-employed IRA. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that you can borrow from your IRA.
Yes.
Okay. And since it was a self-employed IRA and I was borrowing from the IRA, I was both the lender and the borrower. And I had to sign the form through the brokerage house as both lender and I was both sides, and I wasn't sure if I should use my left hand for one and my right hand for the other, or sit in two different chairs when I signed it. It was kind of an interesting thing. But yes, when you are in charge of yourself, you always assume when you're working for somebody that it's, well, I don't want to say you always assume. It's difficult to know exactly what's on the other side until you sit in that chair. And when you have to sit in that chair across the table from yourself,
just wait till I have to give myself my performance evaluation.
That's right. Right. And then the question, can you be humble and can you be honest? So those are some things. So that's been a transition for you. That's
Yeah. So the sabbatical, right? So I just emerged from my sabbatical, and during my sabbatical, what I chose to do was to pursue education and training in executive coaching, because coaching is something that I've always really been intrigued by. Even 20 years ago when I first learned about it in some meetings. And for the last 6 or so years, I've enjoyed having a coach myself that has helped me through a number of challenges, and I've really benefited from my coach's support. So now, in addition to my consulting practice, I'm building a coaching practice, which I'm really enjoying, probably more than the consulting work, to be honest.
So are those two do you see those as two sides of the same coin, or are they two coins in the same bag? Or, pick your favorite metaphor and put them in there.
Yeah. I think I would say two coins in a bag. Yes, but they're not two sides of the coin. Because when you think about a company hiring a consultant, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want the expertise of the consultant who's been there, done that, maybe done it for other institutions. They know kind of best practices, and you want their expertise to come in, and you want them to give you the answers for what to do. Like, write it up, tell us what to do, we'll do it. Or maybe tell us what to do and then we pay you to do it. It could be any, things like that. Coaching is not consulting. It's not it is not telling the client what to do. It's very different from that.
So do you see that different than this? Okay, so you had some sports coaches here or there. You did some swimming when you were younger. You've ridden a horse. That's an athletic thing to do.
Yeah.
Is the executive coaching realm consistent or inconsistent or mirrored, or is it looking through a glass darkly? How is it?
Well, it's a little different. So, let's think about swimming, right?
Sure.
What was the coaching in swimming? I think there was a lot of telling, right? Where, hey, Donahue, you're doing that stroke wrong. You got to do it this way, right? And they would tell you how to do it, right? Or they would tell you how many reps of this or that to do. The way I like to think about coaching is think of a different coach. Think of a stagecoach.
A stagecoach, like coach on the stage, not a stagecoach like pulled by horses?
Like a stagecoach. So here's the connection, horses, right?
Look at that. Nice segue. Okay.
Yeah. Think of a stagecoach pulled by horses.
Okay.
What's the function of the coach? What is it?
It's the coach is to get you there without getting your hair wet.
Yeah. If you're going over water, I suppose.
Or through the rain, yeah.
Yeah. So the coach moves you or helps you move from where you are now, your current situation, to an intentional next place, to where you want to go, right? So the coach helps kind of situate you in your present. And then based on where you want to go, like you bought the ticket to go to San Francisco in the coach, right? So the coach helps you get to San Francisco, helps support you, helps you maybe adopt some different behaviors that you might want to change, questions your perceptions, helps you edit your story, helps you deal with challenges you may be facing as you're navigating that rocky terrain between Denver and San Francisco.
But they don't tell you shouldn't go to San Francisco, you should go to St. Louis.
Correct. A coach would not tell you what the goal should be. The client generates the goals that are meaningful to them. And then the coach, through the process of inquiry and asking questions and sort of both supporting through a safe, confidential process, helps the client engage in that process of moving.
But I can see that, and that's so I can imagine I'm in Denver, and I can imagine at that I think, well, I want to go to San Francisco. And if I hire you as a coach and it becomes apparent that it looks to me like, I got to say it. It doesn't look like you want to go to San Francisco. It looks like you want to go to San Luis. Mm-hmm. And at that point, do you say, look, I got two choices here. I can either coach you to go to San Francisco, like you told me and hired me to do, or I got to balk out because because it's pretty apparent to me that you don't really want to go there. Is that a thing that happens? Is that an issue?
That can be a thing. Yeah. And the coach who's really listening would observe that in the client, right? Based on what the client's saying, what the client's doing, right? So if the client's saying, I want to go to San Francisco, so next week I'm going to go and I'm going to buy a suitcase and I'm going to start folding my clothes and putting them into the suitcase, right? And then next week they meet with the coach and the coach says, so how are things coming with getting ready for your trip to San Francisco? And the client says, oh, well, I watered my garden last week and I ate dinner and took the dog for a walk. Right? Right. Okay. So tell me, how are those outcomes related to getting yourself ready to go to San Francisco? Oh, well, I don't know. I know I still need to buy my suitcase. Right. Well, and then next week they still haven't bought the suitcase. And then week 3, they still haven't bought the suitcase. Okay. So would it be all right with you if I made an observation? Okay. Well, it seems to me that you're doing a lot of talking about going to San Francisco, but you're having some challenges actually getting started. What's really going on there? Right. So the coach can help. And it could be that from the client's perspective, well, I got to take care of the garden before I go because otherwise all my plants are going to wilt. And I have to there's all of these series of steps that have to happen before I can go buy the suitcase, hypothetically, right?
Right.
It could be, and it could all make sense for the client. And if so, that's great. Maybe they're moving forward. Perhaps the pace is just more slowly than what the client had originally laid out. Maybe buying the suit, So, well, how confident are you that you're going to be able to buy that suitcase in the next week? Oh, well, I don't know, because my credit card's all maxed out. I don't think I can buy that suitcase right now. Well, what would be a reasonable time frame where you think you could go get your suitcase? Well, I'm going to get paid, in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really just kind of helping support them and gently nudging when needed, questioning when needed, and helping them arrive at timelines that work for them.
So a situation I find myself in a lot. So no, this is going back to me, of course. This is what we do on the show, right?
Yeah.
So I'll go to my workshop and I'm working on a thing. And last week I was working on a thing. I built a thing. And it took me a long, long time to do this one component of the construction of this thing. Basically because I had uncertainty. All right. I was like putting some drawer slides in there, and it wasn't obvious how the measurements are going to be. And it wasn't obvious to me. This is what you learn, like when you start doing these craft kinds of things. You learn where you can cut the corners, for lack of a better term, and where you have to be spot on. Right? Mm-hmm. Like if you are, like when I learned how to lay bricks, I was very detailed on every individual brick. And the bricklayers thought I did a great job, except I just took way too long, way too long, because I was looking at each individual brick instead of like the wall as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And so you learn that certain bricks you can just kind of pop in there, and other bricks you got to be really careful, like the ones on the ends, like the cornerstone, right? Those things matter, right? Yeah. So I was working on this thing in the shop, and I was having trouble like getting to do the next step because I was like, I get one chance to make this cut. Mm. And it's not obvious to me exactly how to measure this one thing, right? It'd be really nice if 3/4 inch plywood were 3/4 of an inch thick. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yes.
What's insanely frustrating is different pieces of plywood have different thicknesses, even though they're all called 3/4. Hmm. And then throw in the whole metric thing. Yeah. And now who knows what we have, all right? And you have to know what the width of that thing is because that's a piece of the construction. And I was like, should I err on the short side? Should I err on the long side? Because it's a drawer slide, and there's a limit to that tolerance, right? And I find myself, that's a recent example, but a lot of times I will find myself not doing a certain thing because I'm not exactly sure how to do it. And I don't even know how to figure out how to do it. So is that a thing that the coach, like if you were the coach, hypothetically, here, we'll do a coaching thing here. If you were my coach at this point, what do you say? How do you get past that? Because Michelle will say, what'd you get done today? And I was like, well,
thought a lot about making that cut.
I thought a lot about this, and I've discovered I still don't know exactly how I'm going to do it.
So I think I would, if this were a hypothetical, I might say, who can you go to for support?
Okay.
And you would say,
and I would say, I have no idea. Because everybody yes, I can go to some people, right? I could go to some people and ask them. And typically I do ask them and they go, well, I just kind of guess. I was like, well, that doesn't, right? So,
well, what's the worst thing that could happen if you tried the cut? And
yes.
What would happen?
The worst thing that can happen in that sort of situation, assuming the worst probabilistic thing that can happen. I mean, the worst thing that can happen, you put it in there, the table saw kicks it back, you lose your head. Okay. But that's the worst thing that's probably going to happen is a lot of the work that you've already done now goes for naught because you spent a lot of time getting that is a frustrating thing about woodworking. When I made this picture frame that I did, that I carved the Latin in the picture frame. You start with the basic wood, you plane it down, you cut it to dimension, you route the edges of the frame, which gives it the shape, you miter the corners, you put the splines in there to glue it up, you glue it up straight, you get it the right size. Okay, every one of those is a step where you can't go back. And then the last thing is I had to carve the Latin into the wood. And I'm like, I can't, you can't erase. There's not a magic eraser that puts the wood back in the groove. And that got and then I didn't want to get the Latin wrong. That would be the worst thing, is to do a good job, right? So I went to talk to the priest about okay, I'm going to want to say this in Latin. What's the right one? He was like, well, we could go to the Vulgate. I said, good idea. So we went there, we checked it all out. How do you punctuate it? How do you do capitals? Do you do commas? Do they put periods in? Like all of these questions come in because I don't want it to know, right? The worst thing that can happen is you lose all the work you put into it before. That's the thing that really gets me, is I spent so much time and so much effort, and now, oh shoot, I screwed that up. And so I did a thing like that, and I screwed it up. I screwed it up. And what was very interesting to me is I cut a piece that I was supposed to be, and I cut it the wrong way, cut the dimension the wrong way or something. I forget what it was. And I kicked myself for a couple of days on that. And then I thought, well, you know what I'll do? I came up with a way. I'll just put these two pieces together and I'll just fake it. I'll make it look like I did that on purpose. And you know what? It turned out actually better that I had that thing not full size, because it gave me a handhold that I didn't expect that I was going to need to have. And someday when you come, I'll show you what this was. But it turned out actually better, right? And had I to do it over again, I would have done it exactly the wrong way, but I would be much more confident that it was the right way instead of screwing that up. So anyway.
So, yeah. And so one of the other ways that a coach could help is, I heard you say, I screwed it up, right? And the months of work was just, it was all bad, right? So what's another way you could reframe what really happened there? Even before you did the new thing, we were just talking about experiential learning and riding a horse and learning things through experience. So what's another way you could reframe that?
Oh, I've learned so many ways to make mistakes. I was talking to somebody about computer programming. And they said, why does it take so long? Like if you work in pharma, you do a study, they collect all the data, it goes into a database, and then you make a report. Okay. There's clinical development in a nutshell, right? And then you write a report, and the report has statistical tables in it. Like we had this many patients, and this was the average age, and this was the distribution, and here's the outcome from the F test, and all this other kind of junk, right? So you have to program these tables. And I said, why does it take so long to get these tables programmed? And the answer is it doesn't take long to get the tables programmed. In fact, it doesn't even take long to get the tables programmed right. What takes a long time is to convince yourself that you've done it right. And it took me 30 years to learn that, about why it takes so long. Because there are ways I can make mistakes programming that everything will run, it'll look like it's okay, everything is fine, but if in the off chance that something is not as you think it is, I do not think that number means what you think it means, right? I do not think that word means what you think it means. That The Princess Bride taught me a lot about that. You have to be sure that it is what you think it is. And that's what takes forever. I remember one day in industry, I worked all day on a programming problem. I had my schedule was blocked off. And at the end of the day, I had 4 lines of SAS code that I didn't have before. 4 lines. 4 lines of SAS code. That was it. That was the whole outcome of my 8+ hours of work. But you know what? It was the right 4 lines.
I was saying, I bet it was good code.
It was good code. And it was efficient, but it was right. And I could prove that it was right because every piece of it, I checked all the options that were available. And I made sure this is why this option is on, this option's not on, this was right. So all of those things were lined up the right way, and I had the evidence to back up why it was the right one. So what I would say about the woodworking thing is I've learned lots. I've learned that I can make so many different kinds of mistakes, but I learned a new mistake. You know, what doesn't Edison say that with his filament? I learned 10,000 ways to not make a filament, right?
Yes.
I guess that's part of it. I learned a new way that I can screw up that I need to watch out for next time.
Which is a learning, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So anyway, so the kinds of coaching that I'm doing, I'm really enjoying because I believe, and I think this is sort of, one of the themes of your podcast, right, is I think our natural inclination as humans is to grow and continue to expand and develop and, learn. And we do that by responding, by how we respond to new challenges that we face. And sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we don't know how am I going to cut this piece of wood? How am I going to do this? I was working with a client actually last week and she was stuck on I don't know if I should do A or B. I don't know if I should.
Was it a woodworking problem?
It was not. No, it was not. But the more she, was talking through it, she came to understand she lacked a piece of information. And if she had that piece of information, she felt that she would be able to make the decision. So, then it was, well, where could you go to for that? And so she ended up, as most of, usually what happens is the clients are able to discern and come to some great next steps about how they want to move forward, coming out of that. So anyway, I think that's where a coach can really help, is to help you move from where you are now. If there's something dissatisfying about where you are, and you want your future to be different, the coach can help get you there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
If you see these little numbers in the upper part of your screen, there's tick, tick, ticking, tick, tick.
You mean like the little numbers with the time?
The time, the one that says HMS. It's not His Majesty's service. It is hours, minutes, and seconds. And that is the clock that tells us we have to wrap up. We have to wrap up this conversation.
Okay.
So, is there anything? I'll give you anything you want to, like. Typically, we ask something like, "How should listeners seek the good?" What's your advice for somebody to seek the good? What's the answer to doing that in 45 seconds or less?
Okay, so what's coming to me right now is to listen to yourself. Listen to your body. Listen to if you don't feel like this is working right now when you're either at work or in a conversation or whatever. Trust your gut. I think listen to that. Listen to what your body is also telling you, because there's probably something very real there, and trust yourself.
Wonderful.
And once you start trusting yourself, I think you will feel even more empowered to do those things that you have been put on this planet to create and
that's wonderful
with the universe. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So where if people want to contact you and say, "Hey, coach me. I can't hit a curveball."
Okay.
How do we get a hold of you?
Well, I'm still working on a website, so that's not up yet. However, I am on LinkedIn. So just put in my name, Maura, Maura, Donahue, Donahue, and you will find me there. And if you act soon, you will see me there with my plant. I have a post that I put up, I think last week, about my plant. And thinking of metaphors, actually, my plant is a great metaphor for coaching. And you can look at my
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. So you can be found on LinkedIn, Maura Donahue, Donahue. And if But if you screw that up, just send a note to the buff. We will hook you guys up. That is, in classic buff style. We will figure it out and make it work. Maura, thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, Rafe.
All right, wonderful. So the rest of you, you know the deal. Seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.